Hey friends, have you ever wondered how autism and IQ are related? Maybe you've heard that all autistic people have a lower IQ, or that on the flip side, autism is linked to genius somehow. The reality is way more complex than that, and today we're going to dive into it with some research and maybe bust a few myths about autism and IQ. And why am I up in a tree? Well, 2 weeks ago I asked my audience where they'd like to see me film, and up a tree got the most votes. You amazing people, always keeping me on my toes. Keeping me on my toes? Or in this case, branches. Let's head back inside before I fall off.
Imagine trying to measure the intelligence of a dolphin using a standardised land animal IQ test. Sounds a bit fishy, right? Except that dolphins are mammals, actually, and not fish. In this video, we're diving deep into why the traditional IQ bell curve doesn't quite fit when it comes to autistic people. Hey friends, I'm Mike, a late identified autistic adult who sometimes feels like a dolphin navigating a world built for land animals. Now, this is YouTube, which means that the comment section is open, and many people leave comments before watching the video. I see you over there, typing away before watching the video. Stop it! Watch the video first. What is a learning disability or intellectual disability? We're going to mention learning disabilities and intellectual disabilities in this video. Now, these terms are broadly similar, but they're not the same. Intellectual disabilities is used in the United States, while learning disabilities is used in the UK. Specific learning disabilities, such as dyslexia, dyscalculia, and so on, these are neurologically based processing problems that interfere with learning specific skills, like reading or mathematics. They don't affect overall intelligence. They're also usually picked up at school when a child, say, is struggling in specific academic areas. Although in the UK, when we talk about learning disabilities, we usually aren't referring to specific areas like reading or maths, but to what Mencap define as a learning disability is a reduced intellectual ability and difficulty with everyday tasks, for example, household tasks, socialising or managing money, which affects someone for their whole life. People with a learning disability tend to take longer to learn and may need support to develop new skills, understanding complicated information, and to interact with other people. Now, that definition is similar to how the US describes intellectual disabilities. The American Psychiatric Association defines intellectual disabilities as having significant limitations in both intellectual functioning and adaptive behaviour. But they do say that an IQ test is, thankfully, we'll get to it, no longer required for diagnosis. We will get to it in a bit, but the areas of adaptive functioning that the US APA uses are similar to the levels used by the UK. Both the UK and the US define learning and intellectual disabilities as having an IQ score of 70 or below. Mencap is a well-regarded charity in the UK for supporting people with learning disabilities, and they have a page on autism. So let's check it out. They say autism is not a learning disability, but around half of autistic people may also have a learning disability. They're really confident about this. They say it 3 times on this page. Interesting. Now, if this is true, then that would be half of the autistic community in the truest, widest sense, as having an IQ of less than 2 standard deviations below the average. Quick pause. An IQ score, or one's systematising intelligence as measured by the IQ test, does not equate to somebody's worth and value as a human being. It's really important to mention this. It has been a problem in the past. Let's get on with it. What does an IQ bell curve look like? Now, IQ, or intelligence quotient, is often seen as the gold standard for measuring intelligence. Now, IQ tests primarily focus on fluid intelligence. That's the ability to solve new problems and think abstractly. They use tools like the WAIS, which aim for an average score of 100, forming that classic bell curve where about 68% of people score between 85 and 115. A little like this curve right here, where the majority of people who are given this lengthy test end up. It's a shut up and sit down type of paper-based exercise. You will score around 100, there you go, you're perfectly average, off you go. In fact, most people are somewhere between 85 and 115. So why? Why do this experiment at all? How does it affect autistic people and those with learning or intellectual disabilities? In 1903, a French psychologist, Alfred Binet, wanted a practical, objective measure of intelligence. And so he developed the first intelligence test with Theodore Simon, who published this work together as the first IQ test in 1905. Back then, as it is now, a series of paper-based mental exercises. Although we don't ask children nowadays which of these two faces is the prettiest, like they did back then. From 1903 to date, the IQ test has been weaponised by eugenicists and racists. Alfred Binet, the founder himself, explicitly warned against dangerous and unsupported extrapolation of his work, such as using his tests to peg quote-unquote normal children and adults on a single linear scale of immutable intelligence. The main problem with the IQ test is that there's a misunderstanding about what it is designed to measure. IQ testing tells you how good someone is at answering certain types of questions compared to other people answering the same questions. On any given day, and I can tell you this as an autistic person, that my own skill profile, it varies a lot. I'm generally pretty good at hyper-focusing on certain tasks that I'm interested in, like researching, writing, scripting, editing, publishing YouTube videos, but it does vary quite a bit day to day. If I completed an IQ test today, the results would vary significantly if I did it tomorrow too. Especially, as some of you know, the last few weeks for me have been really, really stressful, and no doubt my performance on an IQ test in this period would suffer as a result. And this would be really dangerous when, say, getting a result that you don't like one day and having a number assigned to you that follows you around for the rest of your life on an assumption that that is the amount of raw brain power you have or somehow your worth. It's also worth pointing out that intelligence, according to Dr. Howard Gardner, could mean 8 things, only one of them being the IQ. Gardner says, if you do well in those tests, as long as you stay in school, you think you're smart. But if you ever walk out into Broadway, or onto the highway, or into the woods, or into a farm, you might find out that there are other intelligences that are at least as important. And I couldn't agree more. Standardised IQ tests are designed with neurotypical individuals in mind. They're a one-size-fits-all hat. Not everyone looks good in them, and some of us have unique styles. For autistic people, these tests often fail to capture the full spectrum, pardon the pun, of their abilities. Many autistic individuals have uneven and cognitive profiles. They might be maestros in non-vocal reasoning, but find verbal communication about as much fun as listening to nails down a chalkboard. Moreover, factors like sensory processing differences, communication styles, and anxiety can turn a testing environment into an episode of survivor sensory overload. Imagine trying to solve complex problems while sitting under a flickering fluorescent light with a fire alarm going off. That's what standard testing can feel like for someone on the spectrum. In fact, that's exactly what my GCSE exams did feel like. The intermittent coughing from the back of the room, younger students outside pranking each other to make sort of disruptive noises. That was kind of a thing that happened at the school. And the occasional creak of the exam hall door, followed by the bellowing drill sergeant shouts of a teacher on the invigilation duties towards the naughty kids outside, mind you. But still, you know, we all heard it. Yeah, like that was better. Monotropic focus destroyed for the rest of the day. Nice. Not. And they say we don't understand sarcasm. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders found that sensory sensitivities can vary significantly and impact test performance in autistic individuals, making traditional IQ scores for autistic people as reliable as a chocolate teapot. The study was focusing on an enhanced perceptual functioning model and encompasses the main differences between autistic and allistic perceptual processing. To be honest, hypersensitivity to noise affects many autistic people much more than allistic or neurotypical non-autistic people. That's not exactly groundbreaking science, and there's a great deal of evidence to support this. Plus all of my lived experience. So there is that, if that matters too. You too? Let me know in the comment section below. Okay, let's plot some autism onto this neurotypical graph. Contrary to outdated beliefs, including those by prominent charities and support services, and many others, the IQ distribution amongst autistic people does not follow the typical bell curve. When you hear the phrase, about half of all autistic people have intellectual disabilities, you could be forgiven for thinking that that puts us about here, somewhere at the bottom of the bell curve. This sort of outdated belief means that autism becomes easy to ignore. Even popular YouTubers like Homath, with his fast-growing following, perpetuate this harmful narrative that autism equals reflexive, survival-only, selfish, basal desires. That's the autism thing right down there at the bottom. Research shows that only about 31% of autistic people have an intellectual disability, according to a 2014 study by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That's a shift from older estimates of about half or the majority. It's way less than that. And by the way, when we say autistic people and we're talking about scientific studies, on this channel, unless I say otherwise, this exclusively means formally diagnosed autistic people, because self-identified autistic people aren't usually included in these statistics. And self-identification is valid for a great many reasons. Now, given these simple truths, the proportion of autistic people with co-occurring intellectual disability is significantly lower than a third, probably only a very small fraction of the total group of autistic people. That doesn't mean that autistic people with intellectual and learning disabilities are lesser people than people with higher IQ scores, as we've already discussed. And do stay tuned to the end. I know you'll hear this from a lot of YouTubers, but I will go into something called profound autism later. In fact, a significant portion of autistic individuals score within the average or above average IQ range. Some studies even suggest a bimodal distribution, meaning that there are two peaks, one in the lower IQ range and another in the average to above average range. It's like a roller coaster with unexpected twists and turns, challenging the stereotype that autism is usually linked with intellectual disability. And don't forget, autism in this sense is only the formally assessed and diagnosed people. And in some studies, neurotypicals get to self-report their IQ to researchers. Just thought I'd point that out. Might be relevant. Here's a fun fact for you. A higher proportion of autistic individuals are in the gifted range compared to the general population. But let's not get carried away and assume we're all secret geniuses waiting to unleash our superpowers. It's essential to understand that giftedness in autism often comes with even more extremely uneven abilities. An autistic person might be a coding wizard, but find social interactions about as enjoyable as solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. Or take the example of David Tammet, an autistic savant. He can perform mind-boggling calculations and learn foreign languages in about a week. He famously recited pi to over 22,000 decimal places, taking over 5 hours to read that out from his mind. His incredible abilities highlight the unique profiles of intelligence in autism, but also challenges. He recognised faces to about the level of a neurotypical 6 to 8-year-old, for example. Autistic people often experience within-person variability. This means our ability to perform tasks can fluctuate, like Wi-Fi signals in a concrete bunker. One day we're conquering the world, the next getting out of bed can feel like climbing Everest. This variability isn't inconsistency, it's part of the autistic experience. It's why standardised tests, which provide only a snapshot in a controlled setting, don't capture the full picture. A 2019 study in autism research found that stress and environmental factors could cause significant fluctuations in cognitive performance amongst autistic individuals. Many autistic individuals shine in crystallized intelligence, where we have a deep knowledge in specific areas, exceptional pattern recognition, or a memory that's the envy of elephants. These are skills that standardized IQ tests actually overlook. Autistic people often have these incredible deep interests, often in the strangest, most obscure things that we never chose. Sometimes this level of interest leads to significant academic or scientific or artistic success. Something that even Hans Asperger noted from the children in his Vienna clinic, some of whom were from notable fathers, he said. But none of this is measured on an IQ test. And just like you wouldn't judge a fish by its ability to ride a bicycle, real-world success often relies on applying accumulated knowledge rather than solving abstract puzzles under time pressure. And companies like Microsoft and SAP have recognised this, actively recruiting autistic talent for their unique problem-solving skills and attention to detail. These initiatives have shown that embracing neurodiversity can lead to innovation that's as refreshing as finding an extra fry at the bottom of your takeout bag. That's DEI for you, when it's done well. Hi, autistic people, and let us wear our own clothes to work. Standard IQ tests come with cultural and educational biases. They're built around neurotypical expectations, which can be as exclusive as a secret handshake club. For example, many tests prioritise verbal reasoning and social understanding, areas that might not align with an autistic person's strengths. This bias can lead to understanding the true capabilities of autistic individuals. It's not that the intelligence isn't there, the tools we're using are about as effective as eating using a fork. In recent years, there's been a push to develop more inclusive testing methods. The Raven's progressive matrices test, for instance, focuses on abstract reasoning without relying heavily on language, offering a fairer assessment for some autistic individuals. So, what should we measure instead? If IQ tests aren't cutting the mustard, what should we focus on? Adaptive functioning, perhaps. The ability to handle day-to-day tasks is a more meaningful measure and comes with similar support outcomes too. Skills like communication, problem solving in real-life situations, emotional intelligence and flexibility are crucial for thriving and can be supported, whether autistic or with intellectual learning disabilities or not. We should adopt a strengths-based approach, recognising and nurturing the unique talents of each individual. It's about seeing the person, not just the numbers. After all, would you judge a book by its ISBN number? There are organisations like the Neurodiversity Hub, which provide resources and support for educational institutions and employers. It is being done. I'm trying to do my part here. People are doing theirs. You guys are doing yours. We're trying to make this work. Try to push for change in our lifetimes, I hope. In recent years, there's been a growing movement to redefine how we perceive intelligence and autism, and moving away from using pathological language to describe autistic people and their characteristics. When you're writing about them, when you're talking about them in research, often where pathologies don't even exist, just using pathologizing language for the hell of it. Educational systems are beginning to recognise the limitations of standardised testing. And thankfully, the American Psychiatric Association no longer requires an IQ test for a diagnosis of an intellectual disability, as they did in the past. Schools are piloting programmes that focus on personalised learning and assessment, using tools that measure a broader range of skills and intelligences. In the US, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, ensures that students with disabilities have the right to a free, appropriate public education tailored to their individual needs. It's like giving every student their own personalised playlist instead of forcing everyone to listen to the same album on repeat. The relationship between autism and IQ is a complex symphony, not a single note. IQ tests have their place, maybe, but are not the be-all and end-all of an autistic person's potential. Most autistic people do not have intellectual disabilities, not half, not 2/3. Most autistic people do not have intellectual disabilities, and many possess remarkable strengths that traditional tests can't capture. But what about those who have a formal diagnosis of intellectual or learning disability? Introducing profound autism. This is not just any autism, this is Autism Plus, Autism Pro, Autism Pro Max. Learning disabilities and autism go together like peanut and jelly, I've been told, I think. If you're American, maybe. But I think it's more like a cup of Yorkshire tea and a biscuit. You see, autism is not an intellectual disability, and intellectual or learning disabilities are not autism. And believe it or not, these two separate things get mixed up by people all the time, even those who work professionally supporting either one or both of those groups. If you have a formal diagnosis of learning disabilities, there's a decent chance that this was picked up early on, as your developmental trajectory differed from your peers. Whereas many autistic traits can be masked. For instance, girls can present very differently to young boys, and I've already made videos on this topic on my channel about this, and I still will, if you like, let me know. But if you have that diagnosis of learning disabilities and begin to access support services that focus on supporting people with learning disabilities, but say there is an event run by an autism charity, not You Autism Speaks, then you will miss out. Simon Baron-Cohen has spoken about similar topics prior. He speaks about how in the United States, autism spectrum could be better described as a condition, but is currently referred to professionally as a disorder. This, make no mistake, is for insurance. It's a money thing. And the United States, being a large exporter of culture, means that everyone is affected, including us Brits and everyone else worldwide too. If you are the parent of a child with learning disabilities who currently receives residential care services, then your child may be better served with a dual diagnosis rather than just one. Profound autism is a recent term, which I will go into in depth another time, but this is where somebody has intellectual or learning disabilities to the point of an IQ less than 50, Sorry folks, between 51 and 69, you don't count according to this new label, and are minimally or non-speaking and requiring 24-hour care or supervision. Of course, if you're autistic, then you have a disability and therefore have support needs. Although I'd argue this is more a societal than a medical thing, sort of like a wheelchair user needing to access a building that only has stairs. Like, whose problem is it? Do you know what I mean? Rather than medical. There is a fight, for want of a better word, from those, mostly these are desperate parents of autistic and learning disabled children, for better support, for respite care provision and for attention, and they have my empathy. But this might account for two things. The first being why this part of the curve spikes. It's quote unquote better to have two supporting diagnoses than just the one. And then also why certain services and charities, such as Mencap, continue on with a belief that there's much more autism in the learning and intellectually disabled than there is in reality in the wider world. Do autistic people have higher or lower IQs than typical neurotypicals? Maybe. Do autistic people, like all people, deserve respect, understanding, and there are spiky skill profiles and support needs? Respected and accommodated? Yeah, absolutely. My work on YouTube is only possible thanks to Patreons like these who enable me to spend my time on research, writing, filming, editing, uploading, etc. And if you'd like to join these amazing neurodiverse autistic cats, that's what I call them, on Patreon and Discord, the lowest autistic kitten tier is $4 a month. But Tiger tier will get the bloopers from this video, and there's an exclusive Patreon cat tier video coming soon too. So, see you soon. Bye!